Tony, it's great to have you on the show. I am really excited to hear more about your background and what you're doing today. It sounds like, based on the name of your podcast and some of your work, you're doing inspiring things. So please introduce yourself to our audience and let's dive in.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on the show, David. I am really, what I do for my clients is I work with them to guide them to hike mountains, really, in their careers and in their lives, to find fulfillment and to help them to see what they don't already see in their life. I am a coach. I work with people who are in transition, but also who want to really build their leadership inside of their organizations. So that's what I do.
Okay, so you said a few things there, and you talked about people in transition. So what are you talking about when you mean people in transition? Maybe give us an example.
Yeah, and the reason why I say people in transition is because sometimes people are going through a career transition where they're saying like, oh, I lost my job, or, I want to change what I'm doing. I call it breaking their pattern because really it's about, I've been in the same jobs over and over again, and I find myself not having the best results. So I help them to think differently about how they're approaching their career, or they're stepping into a new level of leadership. And I'll help them to think about how do they want to be as a leader. So it's not always a transition that is about changing your job and leaving. Sometimes it's about how you step up into that next level of leadership. So transition's the key word.
Okay. All right. So, and you talked about helping leaders see things that they're not seeing. What does that mean?
Yeah. So I see coaching as being like the thought partner, the person who rides alongside, a strong person who they don't see the things that are really inside of them. People have so much more strength than they know. They're living in this, in the water they're swimming in. They're the fish who are swimming in the water. They don't know that they're swimming in water. So oftentimes they need someone to say, hey, you're amazing. You're doing amazing things. You just don't see it. And you need someone to kind of shine a light on those things. So that's what I help them do.
Well, can you give me an example? Because people come to you that you may occasionally meet someone at some, neighborhood gathering or a business meeting or something like that. But in general, they're coming to you. And how does this come up? How do you show this to them or pull this out of them?
Yeah, I love that you asked that. So first and foremost, if you think about a person who's in transition, and I'll give you an example, someone coming to me in transition, coming from the metals industry, in the hard metals industry, looking for something new in their life, been in the industry for a long, long time, and not seeing where to go next because the industry is not really going places. So, working with that person to see that what are the strengths that you've had? Where have you really been able to add a lot of value in the industry? I will help him to see that, wow, you've done a lot of great things in that field. And now it's just about taking those skills and seeing where do you want to take it next? Where are the places you can apply them by stepping away? I call it expanding your vision. So you see the possibilities of where what you've been doing can be applied in other places. And then narrowing your focus so that you don't feel like overwhelmed with the possibilities that you have at your hands. So I help people think differently about the way they approach their what's in front of them. So let me give you a more specific example of how this is really played out. I had a client who came to me when he was in the search for a new job, and he was originally a finance professional in the biotech space and kind of frustrated with always being seen as the same person, the technical accountant. And at this point, he's just frustrated that that's how he'd been positioned. And as we worked together, we started to see that the roles he really wanted were something a little more, elevated, something that was more towards the strategic finance person and more towards getting to the CFO seat. And so, we started to talk about what it is that he wanted to do to shift in that direction. he started to see these opportunities that he was like, that's what I want. That's what I'm looking for. And so I worked with him to figure out how to create that brand for him. What are the things that he's done in the past that have really allowed him to see that he can bridge his skills towards that? And ironically enough, he got the job in an organization, a startup, a biotech, which was fantastic. And we worked together to help him to have a really successful onboarding, which didn't just involve him becoming the strategic guy, but also seeing how he could become the best leader inside of that space, embracing emotional intelligence, something that he was like, I don't really know. I don't know how to read people. And we worked together to kind of build that skill set. So it was really fun because it wasn't just about the transition of like, how do I find a job? How do I get to that next job? But it was also about how do I build the emotional intelligence I need to be effective in that job. So I loved it. It was such a great experience. And I loved working with this particular individual.
Yeah, and that's a great example because in that role where he's making a pretty major shift, if I'm understanding correctly, he knew certain things, but being able to talk to someone outside the organization who had some skill, had some experience, or a lot of experience, could, no emotion in making the change. You could help him really identify, how to navigate versus if he works with someone inside, which he probably was also, I would assume, but they're going to have a certain bias and, certain limited view based on whether, what they think of him or possibly the organization. So, no, that sounds great. That's a great example. I'm also interested in, you talk a lot about in being inspiring or inspiring people. So what's kind of unique that you do there?
Yeah. The key thing is that, people have to be inspired, or leaders need to be inspired in order to inspire others. And so I try to connect with the people I work with to see what is it that really lights them up. If you're not doing that, if you're not connecting with something that truly makes you want to come to work every day, then it's really hard for you to get the people on your teams to be, embracing their work, to want to come to work. I've worked for many years in biotech, and it's important to feel a connection to the work. I mean, we're saving lives. So it's really something that's a passion play. But even there can be a lack of passion and inspiration on a day-to-day basis. I'm happy to share some stories around that as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm particularly interested if maybe you've been contacted by a board member at some point or a peer of an executive who said to you basically, hey, we got this guy who's in this executive position, or a woman, and they got so much potential, but something's wrong. They're not connected with what we're doing, and so they're flat, and it's negatively affecting the team.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is just that it's like, and I can share a story that of someone I've worked with in the past, where the wealth of experience that people have. This one gentleman that I worked with, he had worked in the industry for a long, long time, but he felt as though at his level, working the C level, he was having a hard time really connecting with the people in the organization. He was more the analytical type. So oftentimes it was all about the data. It was all about, coming from the scientific field, he was more analytical and hard-nosed around the numbers and the science, but not connecting from a personal, what does the patient need? What do people need to feel as though they're truly connected to the story? And so I helped him to really see that there's an element of showing up in a different way, to show up with the vulnerabilities of like, I don't have all the answers. I don't have everything played out in a playbook. But what I do have is I have, a strong desire to see these patients get something that's going to help them to live a longer life. And I want to help you. I want you guys to come along the journey with me to help make this happen. And this talk that he was able to develop was really powerful because it was delivered in a way that said, I don't have all the answers, but here it is. This is how we're going to rally again to get that done. Really beautiful.
So when you describe that, I'm wondering, how did he move from the analytical side, which can sometimes be cold and calculating or distant at least, to being more open or vulnerable? What are some of the things she did? There's a lot of executives that suffer with that.
Yeah. Yeah, part of it is really coming back to, what is missing, and playing out the stories that have really shown up in his evolution to becoming who he is. I first of all had to connect with his past. Even on the show, my virtual campfire, I'm always talking about people's stories and what got them to that point. What we realized is there was a lot of things behind the story of how he became, first of all, a scientist, and what drove him into biotech in the first place. And I got him to connect with that story of what he's all about. He wasn't sharing those stories. So in reality, I got him to see that he wasn't sharing a part of him. He wasn't showing up fully in work. And by doing so, if he allowed himself to be, he would be able to connect more fully with his people. And it's not easy. It's not like you just show up one day and say, yeah, I'm going to do this. We had to practice. We had to do a little let's say, practice moves within the office, showing up more vulnerably, sharing little parts of himself. And that was really cool to see that play out in that way. And eventually that all led to that moment where he was able to share with his organization. Now, this is a startup, not like a big, 500-person company, but it was really beautiful to see that he got to that point where the confidence to share more of himself, and it drove people to really see that this is a person who really cares, not just about the patients, but about them as employees. And that is what's important.
Yeah, I can see how that worked, and that really connects. That's great. And do you find that with a lot of your clients, you have to do that role playing to help them kind of walk through these new behaviors or new habits?
Yeah. I mean, it's coming back to that whole thought process of like, nothing happens with one big leap. It's a tiny step that you need to take, and you build the muscle over time, and then eventually you look back and you say, "Oh my gosh, how did I get here?" It's no different than anything you learn. The learning process has to take shape in a way that allows them to really see it settle in. So yeah, I think that's really it's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, interesting. So what are some of the other things you're doing that are unique to your work with clients?
Yeah, right now I've been doing a lot of work with people to see that, right now the challenging time we are with COVID and the pandemic, there's a lot of people not so sure about the future and what's going to happen. They're trying to plan for the future, and it's hard to plan. So it's about, how to have a plan in place, but not to be so hell-bent on keeping to that plan. So I've worked with people around, creating a game plan, but also having that non-attachment to that game plan, and being very adaptable to what's showing up, but also seeing it as a gift that can allow for some potential opportunities that we can flex and form. I mean, look at all the people on Zoom these days. We would never have expected that so many people could work remotely now like this. So just to give you an example, I've worked with people who are in the restaurant industry, and I've had
That's a toughie.
Kind of odd. What's that?
That's a toughie right now. And my fiance went yesterday to get somebody a gift at a bakery. She went to 2 local bakeries. They're closed for good.
Yeah.
Because we're in California where the shutdowns are continuing. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's killing us. So, but anyway, keep going.
Absolutely. But I mean, just having these conversations with, this group of people they have a chain of restaurants, and they were really struggling to figure out how to move forward and to continue to do what they're doing. And so one of the things that they came to me with was like, well, we're not sure whether we should continue to serve. We can't serve food in person. Should we open our doors and create a situation where we can do something that will have outdoor seating? Or do we create more of an online presence where people can, order online and pick up And this is a business that didn't have any of that before. So ultimately, we started having conversations about how they could flex and form. And their biggest concern was whether or not they can continue to operate. They had to lay off a bunch of people, so it was really challenging for them. And they started to change their view, and they see that they could do something different. They could offer their food and continue to operate. And they actually put together these packages that allow people to make their food at home, which is really really cool. So
that's great. Let's talk about that as a creative exercise. I'm really interested. I love this type of thing. Sorry, rabbit trail, but I think so. So here you are. You're a restaurant. This is one of the most decimated industries besides travel and hospitality.
Yeah.
In this thing that's going on. So here I'm thinking I'm going to do takeout because it sounds like that's where they went. So how do we do takeout better than we did before? So one thing they did was they created this package where you can put together your own meal and then you're going to cook it at home. Is it you're cooking it or you're warming it up at home?
You're cooking it at home with all the ingredients with instructions that they made. So it's one of their recipes, but they basically give the instructions as to how to make it at home.
So they get everything prepped for you. So they're like a sous chef for you. And then they give it to you with instructions. Do they have videos that show you how to do things too?
No videos.
See, a video would be cool. A video would be cool. So now the other thing would be is a little add-on. Remember, you got to add on, right, to make additional money. Is there something you could add on? Now, some of these might be free. Some of them might cost. But what if you could add on maybe a few music tracks that they would enjoy at the restaurant?
Like the ambiance. Now we're really getting creative.
Come on, and then maybe you got some candles or something like that, right? Yeah. Maybe there's a candle. You could in our restaurant we have this smell, this scent. You could do the candle, or maybe there's and I'm just trying to think when you go to the restaurant. So there's different things there. Really, the candle, the music. That's kind of interesting. So what other ways could you make it so it was unique? So it's more, because that's one of the things. It's like I met this wonderful woman on March 6th of this year and asked her to marry me a few months later. And so we're going to get married, in the first quarter. Really excited about that. But, we laugh about it because in California with all the shutdowns, our dates are, we go to Costco, we go to Trader Joe's, we might go to Chipotle, but heaven forbid, we can't eat there inside. So now some of the restaurants, have opened for outside seating, which is great. And we need to do that, but it's really been bizarre.
Yeah.
And so be able to recreate that environment would be really cool.
But the great thing about it is just really kind of reframing your thought process to say like, this is not the end. It's only the end if you want to call it the end. But the reality is if you have the passion to continue, if you have the passion to see something through, then you can change the way you look at the situation and you can reframe it and create something more beautiful out of the situation. And that's what's been so cool about it. And I hate to say like, it's such a great thing. It is this is a really challenging situation. We've all lost people and we've all had real big upsets in this time, but if you let it defeat you, then it will. So the best way to reframe that is to say, what can I make of it? How can I raise myself out of the situation and make something amazing? And I just wanted to, add one piece of context to this, and that's that, I hear people's stories all the time through my podcast, and it's oftentimes I hear these amazing, what I call flashpoints in people's stories, these really, pivotal points in their story where, really dark moments sometimes that all of a sudden through those dark points can just turn people around and say, this is now my calling because I found through that darkness, something amazing has taken me and turned me around. And maybe it's hope, maybe it's inspiration, but something that really turns a corner for people. And it's really what we all need.
I'm wondering if when they hit that dark point, that the turning point is actually, excuse me, something that happens and they're able to reverse roles with their clients or potential clients and see something they didn't see before. Because if I'm hearing you say that it was a calling or it's more meaning, they're suddenly focused on, hey, there's a problem I can solve, instead of, what do I do about my cash flow? Or, oh, I have to lay everybody off. Or, oh, this is terrible for me. I can't buy my new Cadillac, or whatever it is. Is that what happens? Or I don't know whether you have an example of that, but is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think it is. And this word keeps on showing up, the reframe, which is really important. It's not seeing it as like, okay, it's my problem, or it's the problem is putting me down. It's not my problem. It's a problem that can be reframed around a solution that is geared towards what the client needs or what people need, and how can I best serve that need. And when you think about that, it's not about what's in the way, the obstacle that's in the way. It's more about, how can I get that, what the client needs most, or what people need most, the customer, and get over that. There's an element of just thinking about not what's in front of me, but what's on the other side of it. That really makes a big difference.
Yeah, it makes perfect. I'm staying with the restaurant example. So, they thought about, we have takeout. That's great. Can we do that any better? But then also, can we do another option where they're able to cook it themselves? Yeah. And I thought of two other things. One, you could provide, as part of the takeout, conversation topics, questions to ask. Here's some questions you can ask while you're cooking this. And maybe it has to do with the food you're cooking, or where it came from, or something else. You get in this conversation. Or you could, and once again, an add-on, you could say, hey, you're going to go to the work to cook this food. Why don't you buy one of our desserts? So you can reward yourself when you're done. I mean, you could really have fun with it, but when you're stuck in the mode of, oh man, I got to close my restaurant, and there's so much stress. Yeah. That is reasonable, right? Because you've spent so many years building a business, and now you got to go in reverse. Interesting.
Yeah, and just to take it back to some of the other, the examples of the biotechs, or, the companies that, where employees are working from home, there's an element of like, okay, well, now we can't have the employees at home, in the office. And yeah, that's definitely a challenge, but they're all getting a lot done at home. The biggest challenge right now is making sure that they set boundaries for them to be able to be productive, and not feel as though they're working 24/7, or they feel like there's no boundaries between work and home. And that is something that a lot of organizations can help with. And that's what I've also been trying to help my clients with, is to see that there's ways to be better online.
Yeah. So are you also finding with the people that move remote, and I agree with you, it's happening in many cases, it's very productive. Are you finding there are any communication issues where things aren't being communicated as often or as well as previously? And what about the banter side? What about creating opportunities for banter? Because that's what I've been working with my clients on to a certain extent. What are you finding with your clients?
Yeah, I love that you say that, because I think it's so important, because it can't just be about just the work, right? There's an element of, you can't miss the human connection that is beyond just okay, let's get this project done, or let's get to work. It's creating some opportunities for fun to get in there and have some moments for that. And so I've been, creating different experiences for that. One of the things I just recently was talking about was doing like scavenger hunts for people, like where they, it's called the Storyteller scavenger hunt, which was amazingly fun, and also a great way to get to know the people who are on your team. And, there's different things like that if you really consciously take the time to create those moments for your team, it can be really powerful.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I've got a client, and they're doing, I think it's once every 2 weeks, they're getting together, and actually it's off hours. It's after work for an hour, and they'll just banter for an hour like they would be kicked back in the office. You could do it during hours also. I've also recommended to them that once a month, let everyone order takeout for dinner. Yeah. And the company picks up the tab and they all order their different food. Then they talk about their food.
Yeah.
Online and Zoom while they're wolfing it down, talking. And, the interesting thing is that with a few companies that I've talked to about this, they're having 100% participation by employees, even whether it's during work hours or after work hours. They enjoy each other and they enjoy reconnecting, on personal stuff. I think a couple have also done, like what you're mentioning, a scavenger hunt or an online game, or they'll go on and they'll do some gaming app, where they're all killing each other or something like that. But I work with a lot of tech, so it's, they're used to that type of thing. But that's bonding for them to kill each other online. So it's not a bad thing.
There's one thing about this that I wanted to also just make sure it's important to mention is that there's when you do have these events, or even just any of the online world that we've all kind of put ourselves in, is to keep an eye out for the quiet ones, the people who don't who get overtalked, or the people who are tend to kind of shy away in the corner, to make sure you give everyone a chance to speak and have a voice. Because it's hard sometimes, especially in a larger team, when the quieter ones get shouted out. So it's really important as a leader to ensure that you get everyone to have a voice in the room.
So does it make sense, because some of those people actually like being in the background, does it make sense with some of them, maybe not all, to let them know in advance, I'm going to call on you. I'm going to ask you this question or that question. Are you going to be okay with that? I just want to see you, participate. I don't want to see everybody else doing all the talking. Is that okay with you? Does that make sense?
Well, I think it makes sense for sure. There's definitely going to be an element of wanting to have some one-on-one check-ins. But I think even one of the best ways that you can do that is to have check-ins at the beginning and at the end, a check-in and a check-out for a meeting. If you're going to have a team meeting or something to that effect, just having someone say, like, hey, how are you? Like, let's have everyone go to the room and just say something about, like, a one-word check-in. What's the one word that describes, like, your day or how you're feeling? That's a good way to just see, like, what's the emotional state that people are in. And then by the end of the meeting, like, okay, we had this meeting, like, what is one way that you would describe your takeaway on this discussion? Because if they're in the meeting and they're not feeling as though this is a meeting that's for them, then maybe they shouldn't be in the meeting, because God knows they could probably use the time to go do something either on their own or spend some time with their family while they're home. So
yeah, no, makes perfect sense. Or you could do a check-in and say, hey, what's your biggest high this week? What's your biggest low that you want to share in work or outside of work? And so they get a chance to dump and they get a chance to, it might be, hey, I went on a bike ride, or I went for a hike, or I saw my grandkids, or, whatever it might be. So
that's it. I mean, that's exactly it. Some sort of a way to share a little bit of something, what's going on for them, because you don't have that. The water cooler is not there. So, absent the water cooler, then you have this. And in fact, we might find that this is something that wouldn't normally even get in person, that every voice does get heard at least once.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, okay, well, as we wrap up here, Tony, any closing thoughts you have for our people as far as in this challenging economic time, and who knows what's going to happen after the election? What do you got to say to our people? What should they be doing?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing for people to do right now is make sure you're checking in with yourself, making sure that that if you're not feeling as though you're fully fulfilled with what you're doing, you have a look and see, where could things be a little bit brighter for you, and how could you make a little pivot into something more fulfilling. And don't be afraid to take one tiny step towards something more positive.
Awesome. If we will have this on the podcast posts and on YouTube, but if they want to learn more about what you're doing, where would they go to find that?
The best place would be inspiredpurposecoach.com.
All righty. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Tony, so much for being with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming on the show.